the most successful ancient empires, lasting for around 2,000 years, from around 221 BCE to 1644 CE. Historians divide China's history into periods ruled by the same families called dynasties. These dynasties had different types of governments, but rulers based their right to govern on the mandate of heaven. This states that heaven chose a particular dynasty to rule. Heaven supports the dynasty as long as they are ruling well. Signs that they weren't ruling well are natural disasters. The Tang and Song dynasty were some dynasties that did really well. The Tang dynasty was one of the largest dynasties. During these dynasties, the government chose the ruling class for their dynasties, made innovations that affect the world today, and improved their economy, in some ways benefited, and some ways blocked by their surrounding geography. All of this contributing to one of the greatest ancient empires. Ancient China had geographical features that isolated them from the rest of the world. 5 of these features include the Himalayas, the Kunlun Shan Mountains, the Tian Shan Mountains, the Talakman Desert, and the Gobi Desert. The Himalayas are rocky and very cold. They contain the largest mountain on the planet, the Everest. This mountain range is at the southwest border of China and isolates them from that direction. Here behind me are the Himalayas. The Kunlun Shan Mountains are north of the Himalayas. Its climate varies from cool at the bottom to freezing at the top. This mountain chain makes a part of the western border of China. This is a photo of the Kunlun Shan mountain range. The Tian Shan Mountains are north of the Kunlun Shan Mountains. Like the Himalayas, its climate is very cold and it is very rocky. This mountain range makes up another part of the western border of China. If you'd be so kind to direct your attention behind me, you'd see a photo of the Tian Shan Mountains. The Talakman Desert is the second largest desert in the world. It is located between the Kunlun Shan Mountains and the Tian Shan Mountains. Together, the Kunlun Shan Mountains, the Tian Shan Mountains, and the Talakman Desert make up the western border. This is a part of the Talakman Desert, and it is one of the driest places on the earth. The Gobi Desert stopped the Chinese expansion to the north. Right now, I am standing at the Gobi Desert. These 5 geographical features isolated China from the rest of the world, which in my opinion was a positive. The Chinese were still able to trade using the Silk Road and also by sea, but they could use the geographical features to defend themselves from the enemies. The geographical features blocked them from expanding their empire further, which allowed the Chinese to focus on the empire and improve upon it.
Ren Zheng was the first person ever to gain title for emperor. He was the first one to start any dynasty ever. The Han dynasty later came, which held power over China for 400 years, until the Sui and the Tang dynasty took over. So you might be thinking, how can one single person control the entire government? Here's the thing, they don't. The Chinese invented what is called a bureaucracy. The bureaucracy helped the emperor rule it. There were multiple bureaucracies, one for each need, and if any one of them was being dishonest, then families would go to poverty and there will be a disaster for everyone. They also had to choose specific people to rule China, so that all people were smart, trustable, and actually helpful. To choose these people, the Chinese government made a difficult test called the Civil Service Exam, which was based on the 4 books of Confucius. Although these exams favored aristocrats, the scholars took over their place. The aristocrats, being that they were, disliked this and tried to marry themselves into the imperial family. The aristocrats were wealthy and were able to give more money to the government, but they were no use since they weren't smart enough. And that's how the scholars took their place over aristocrats. The scholars were known for their smartness. This was the reason that they were able to help the government more than the aristocrats and any other group. The civil service exam was the best way to choose the best type of people into the government, since picking people from their own family didn't work. Rest in peace, Mongols. The civil service exam led to the best outputs from the leaders by choosing the right people, which was the scholars.
During the Tang and Song dynasties, there was a growth in the economy. A change in agriculture was a major reason for the growth. Farmers moved south because of attacks from tribes in Mongolia. This changed what the farmers grew to rice. A new variety of rice that was resistant to drought and matured in 2 months instead of 5 was brought to China. So rice production increased. Production increased even more with new tools and techniques. Farmers used an improvised plow, which made preparing the field easier, used fertilizer, and used a chain pump to water the fields. Another reason for growth in the economy was an increase in growth of trade and commerce. Wealthy landowners wanted to buy luxuries. A demand for luxuries increased the amount of trade. A vast network of rivers and canals that connected to different parts of China helped commerce because it was cheaper and faster to move goods by water than road. Innovations in navigation helped increase overseas trade. The government printed paper money in large quantities. The increase in currency led to growth in trade and commerce. Urbanization also increased during the Song dynasty. Chinese cities became the largest in the world. People moved to the cities because there are many jobs and they like the social life of the cities.
How have medieval Chinese discoveries and inventions influenced the modern world? Well, the Chinese invented the compass, which tells direction using the poles of North as a magnet. This invention is still used today in ships and also used as an easy way to tell direction. Remember that time when you almost drowned on the paddleboat in the middle of Lake Tahoe? Well, I do. Vividly. That was me, by the way. And yes, the Chinese invented the paddleboat. In fact, we still use the same technique today to make these boats. Without the Chinese, almost the government in the entire world would have completely been collapsed, and the government in some places would be very unstable. The Chinese invented paper money, which is only worth what it says it is, unlike before the Chinese when money had a different value than itself. Without the Chinese, an entire world would not be this ahead with technology. The government would have collapsed and there will be chaos everywhere and people in poverty. The Chinese invented the seismograph, which was the first step that humans took to study earthquakes, and maybe in the future we will be able to predict it. And guess what else the Chinese made? Nope, you're wrong, the Chinese did not make instant ramen. The Chinese made gunpowder that are supposed to be put in guns so that they are easier to fire. The Chinese made gunpowder for guns, and we can use these guns to keep us safe from danger. China has impacted the world in many different fields, such as technology and also governing ideas that we use today in the modern world, from stabilizing the government with paper money all the way to advancements in the medicine. China's ingenuity and thriving economy and isolation in some ways all added up to one of the greatest ancient